Shoham, on the Shoham Memphis committee. I am thrilled to be part of this program, particularly because we are celebrating International Women's Day and women making a difference. And when we gathered on the Memphis side to select women who in our community have made a difference, we had 2 women at the top of our list who we wanted to participate, and they both immediately said yes, and we have them here for you today, and it's my great pleasure to introduce them. First up, we have the Honorable Sheryl Lipman, who is a United States District Judge serving in the United States District Court for the Western District of Tennessee. That is our federal court system here in the United States, and she serves here in Memphis. I could go on for a long time introducing her, but I will try and give the highlights. Judge Lipman assumed the bench on May 27th, 2014. She earned her Bachelor of General Studies from the University of Michigan in 1984 and her law degree from NYU School of Law in 1987. She spent much of her time practicing law as in-house counsel for the University of Memphis, where she began working as senior counsel in 1999, then serving as university counsel from 2002 until her confirmation as a district judge. She's also served as the interim chief of staff to the interim president of the University of Memphis from July 2013 until May 2014. Prior to joining the University of Memphis, she was in private practice in Washington, D.C., and then later worked in private practice here in Memphis. She's also worked briefly for the Memphis Race Relations and Diversity Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the value of workplace diversity. She is on a host of nonprofits, boards, and really gives back to our community. She has served on the board of directors, including inaugural boards of Hands on Memphis and the Tennessee Shakespeare Company, the Memphis Child Advocacy Center, the National Ornamental Metal Museum, which is a really cool museum if you ever come to visit Memphis, the Memphis Regional Planned Parenthood, the Memphis Jewish Community Center, the Civilian Law Enforcement Review Board, and the American Civil Liberties Union of Tennessee. She is a fellow in the Memphis Bar Foundation and is a Master Emeritus in the Leo Bierman Senior Chapter of the American Inns of Court. Judge Lipman was honored to previously serve as a law clerk to the United States Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals Judge Julia S. Gibbons when she sat on the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Tennessee, which is where Judge Lipman is now serving as a district judge, and Judge Gibbons is now on our appellate court, the Sixth Circuit. She is a widely accomplished woman, Judge Lipman, and we are so thrilled to have her here. Our other distinguished Memphis guest is Dr. Sandra Arnold. She is the Division Chief of Infectious Disease at Le Bonheur Children's Hospital at University of Tennessee Health Science Center. She attended medical school at the University of Toronto and trained in pediatrics and infectious disease at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. She has worked at Le Bonheur and the University of Tennessee for over 20 years and became her head of division 8 years ago. Dr. Arnold does clinical research in the areas of vaccines, new antibiotics and antivirals, and common infections, including bone and joint infections, pneumonia, histoplasmosis. That's a big word. I'm sorry, Sandy, if I messed that up. I speak Judge Lipman's language as a lawyer, not this. I do know from Sandy, always finish your antibiotics. She'll be very upset if you don't. She runs the antimicrobial stewardship program at Le Bonheur. During the pandemic, she provided COVID-related guidance to schools and other community organizations, and that's really underselling it. She was on the news a lot here in Memphis, giving guidance community-wide on COVID safety and COVID protocols. Back to you, Limor, to introduce our other 2 distinguished guests from Israel.
So I'm delighted to present today 2 extraordinary women from Shoham who are making an impact in the fields of expertise. Dr. Ronit Peled-Laskov is a clinical criminologist and a senior lecturer at the Department of Criminology in Ashkelon College. She's an active researcher, mainly in the fields relating to crime, punishment, and rehabilitation, with special emphasis on white-collar offenders. Her doctoral thesis dealt with the development of empathy. She was also involved in comprehensive study of violence prevention in school. As part of her new work as a researcher, she has extensive experience in interviewing prisoners, both in and out of prison. She currently serves as a public representative on parole committees and as an official prison controller by the Ministry of Public Security here in Israel. The other extraordinary woman is Dr. Gili Hart. She is a biotech executive serving as the CEO of the Israeli company SpillSense. But she was a CEO for other biotech companies and was able to take them public and be very, very successful and help those companies to grow. So Dr. Hart has broad experience in global regulatory strategic planning, partnering with large pharma, public company roadshows, and financing. In addition, she brings extensive experience in managing critical global programs ranging from discovery phase to phase 3 clinical trials. In the last 6 years, Dr. Hart is serving as the head of the Amit Scout Group here in Shoham, which is a very popular youth movement. In this voluntary work, she is leading all the educational and operational activities of the group and is engaged with the community, the municipality, and the National Scouts youth movement. So from here, this is where we start to ask you the questions. Please.
Okay. So we're going to try and do this sort of round robin where we each ask questions of the different panelists and we kind of keep going around and around. First up is Judge Lipman. I'm a little nervous. Usually I'm in front of you and I like have a motion or something to argue. I am prepared today. All right, Judge. You are currently the only female district judge sitting here in the Western District of Tennessee. And that's a big deal because once you're an Article 3 judge for our Israeli viewers, once you're an Article 3 judge, that's it. You've got a lifetime appointment. And it's rare for women, or at least it was rare in the past. Does this impact how you view your role on the bench among your male colleagues, being the only woman currently sitting in the Western District?
First, thank you for that lovely introduction. Way too long, but lovely. It doesn't. Well, it's an honor to serve on this bench. It's an honor to be the third woman on the bench. Judge Gibbons was the first, and Judge Bernice Donald the second. Both of whom are now on the Sixth Circuit, our Court of Appeals. I don't think it affects the way I view my role vis-a-vis my male colleagues. I think my experience with them has been absolutely wonderful. Excuse me, we're lucky in Memphis to have a very collegial bench. Not all, from what I understand, not all district court benches are like that around the country. We all get along very well and respect each other a great deal. But it's been interesting becoming a judge, particularly after being counsel at the University of Memphis. University lawyers are a very collegial group. They reach out to each other. They seek help from each other. Judges aren't like that. And whether it's because it is fairly male dominated, whether it's just the unique role that judges play. And as you pointed out, we're appointed for life. Whatever the reason, judges don't really reach out to each other to seek help that much. I think I do a little bit more, and one of my other colleagues who is my age, I think his birthday's within a week or two of mine, we both reach out to each other a little bit more, but I don't, so again, I don't think it affects my role as it relates to my colleagues. I do think it affects my role as a judge in court, both for litigants and for lawyers who appear before me. And by litigants, I mean the parties themselves. The message that it sends to males and females that being a judge is something that anyone can do, that it's not gender specific, that we all have the ability to progress and to be who we want to be, whatever that is. I think it's a great message to people, both in court who I see and who know that I have this position.
One follow-up before we move on to our next thing. Have you had other women judges as mentors?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I clerked for Julia Gibbons when she was a district court judge. And so I believe my style is very much modeled after hers. She was and is a strong presence in the courtroom, but I think she is an incredible listener. And that's what I try to do when I'm on the bench. I listen to everyone. And again, for those in Israel, maybe those in Memphis as well, we hear in federal district court, we hear both criminal and civil cases. So on the civil side, it's any kind of a lawsuit, a business suit, a slip and fall, it could be anything. On the criminal side, I preside over trials, and when people are found guilty or plead guilty, I sentence them. And so it's there are a lot of extremely serious things we deal with in court. And so I certainly try, as she did, to make sure it's clear that I'm in charge, but yet I'm also want to listen to what everyone has to say and make sure people in the courtroom feel like they've been heard, feel like I'm taking into consideration what they've had to say, because I am. So I want to convey that to them. And that sort of aura of formality, control, yet empathy. I wrote down that Ronit did her paper on empathy. I think that's incredibly important in everything a judge does.
Definitely, it must be.
So I want to connect what Sheryl, Judge Sheryl Lipman said about empathy, and bring on board Dr. Ronit Peled-Laskov, because just like you said, Ronit, in your professional life, can I see Ronit? I think it's somebody.
Yeah, I'm here. Yes.
So in your professional life, you're a clinical criminologist who is working closely with prisoners and the Rehabilitation Authority. Can you share with us how you develop and maintain your empathy when dealing with offenders and criminals?
Okay. So hello, everyone. And I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for inviting me. To begin with, if we are talking about empathy, first of all, what is empathy? I think empathy is like the capacity to feel and understand what another person is experiencing. And you're probably born with this. I think this capacity is probably born, but it's also something you develop. And like even in therapy, when you want to help criminals, one thing you do is you help them develop empathy towards their victims. So how do you develop empathy when you work with criminals? First of all, not all criminals can deserve empathy. Okay, it's like, I don't know, like psychopathic murderers or rapists. not that they won't deserve empathy, but it will be harder. Okay, it will be harder. So if I look at it like how do I develop empathy, I think it's a combination of several factors. I will try to talk about them. First of all, I think it's your nature as a person to be empathic, knowledge and also experience. Let's start with the nature. Like if I see myself, I'm from young age, I was always curious about human behavior. And also I develop attitudes that help me be empathic, like attitude like a person can be changed. A criminal doesn't always, or it's like criminal doesn't stay a criminal all his life. It can change. Of course, I'm not naive, but in many cases it can happen. And also, I believe that if you believe in someone, it's something that can change him. I heard a lot of ex-convicts saying, I just needed someone to believe in me. So I think these are attitudes that help me be empathic towards criminals. So
maybe the follow-up questions, because we are marking Women's International Day today.
Yeah, okay.
Can you tell us anything about women offenders who serve their time? And what are the chances to rehabilitate and return back to the society?
Okay. So first of all, if we're talking about women prisoners, they constitute only about 1.5% of all prisoners. Like in Israel,
or?
No, it's something internationally. From what I know, in Israel, we have like about 14,000 prisoners, and let's say about 200 are females. So this is the starting point. And most women prisoners, I can say, have experienced abuse in some form, mainly sexual abuse. I had a story in, I work in parole committees, and one story it's hard for me to forget is a Bedouin woman. She was a young girl, and her father enforced her to marry a man that was older than her, like 30 years older than her. And she married him, and like even in the first night, he was terribly violent towards her, raped her, and was very abusive. And after some time, she managed to divorce him, but her father didn't give up. Said, you're going to marry the next one, another man, and also an older man, also abusive, also violent. And in the end, she killed him. And so these kind of women we see in parole boards, with a lot of victim history. So first, this is, I think, one of the things I can say about women prisoners. Not that men don't have history, abusive history, but if we compare, I think women have more. What else can I say? Relative to men, women receive fewer visits from their family. Like when they get to jail, again, compared to males, they are less visited, and their families, a lot of them fall apart. And the husbands, in many cases, don't take care of the children, and they abandon the home, and this is a problem. Women prisoners are allowed to raise children up to the age of 2 years. They are in prison, and then they have to be separated. If you asked about the chance of reoffending, so women prisoners, when they get out of jail, there is a 35% chance that they will come back. It's a bit lower than males. If I compare to males, it's like 10% less than men. Another thing about women that I think it's unique is that there are many, I just met many prisoners, female prisoners, that the prison is a shelter for them. It's really hard to get it, but imagine that it's the safest place they have. And there is even a book in Israel published by the name of In Prison I Rest. okay, or prison lets me rest. So it's really sad when you hear these stories. And of course, if we talked about empathy, they gain a lot of empathy from me. And there's also cases where women just leave prison, and because they find prison as a shelter, they reoffend and come back to prison. What else can I say about it? For a paroled woman, like a woman that 1/3 of her sentence is reduced, okay, she has a lower chance of coming back to jail. And when in Israel, a paroled prisoner is like, if she got 3 years, like her sentence was 3 years and she got paroled, it means like 1 year cut off from her sentencing. Then in this year, she is not free. She's under the supervision and also the support of the Prison Rehabilitation Authority. And this means that in this period, she has to work. And the authority helps her find work. And she also has to participate in psychological therapy, also individual therapy and group therapy. And we have good results. Like if I said 35% of prisoners come back to jail, when you participate in this, in the parole, when you are a paroled prisoner, it really lowers the probability that you will come back to jail. And for women, I didn't say it earlier, but for women, they have more, as I said, they are more abused, and they are mentally more, you see more illness, mentally illness, and you see more drug addiction. So for women to succeed in rehabilitation, I think it's a great compliment for this program that supports them and help them. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That is really fascinating. Thank you so much for that, Ronit. Wow. Well, switching from women in prison, I guess, to a different type of very serious societal event that we had, that's affected all of us in the past year. Dr. Arnold, you have been the division chief of infectious disease at Lebanon, and during what ended up being a worldwide pandemic, as a short story to all of you, as the world came crashing down around all of us, the week that the pandemic really shut everything down, I was constantly texting our very own Sandy Arnold with my questions about the pandemic. She's not only a leader in the community, but she's a really great friend in terms of giving advice on all of these things. Talk to us about how infectious disease experts were called upon in Tennessee, and what lessons you've learned that you can share with our audience related to the role of women science leaders during the pandemic, both in terms of research and treatment, Sandy.
Sure. So probably before the pandemic, a lot of people had never heard of an infectious disease specialist, unless you've been in the hospital, for example. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Unless you've been in the hospital, you might not have encountered us. We tend to roam the hospitals looking for pretty much the sickest patients around, and we tend to be a support team, and so in the sense that, you know, I don't operate on anybody. There are some diseases that are definitely my purview. I mean, tuberculosis, for example, is definitely the purview of infectious diseases. But a lot of what we do is to support other physicians in helping get their patients well, you know, who develop infections while they're in the hospital or after they've had surgery, among a wide variety of other things. And so being front and center was a different experience for sure. again, like I said, people didn't know that we really existed. It was great to have somebody like Dr. Fauci be the face of infectious diseases physicians. I think calling him an infectious disease physician is sort of an understatement because he's run the National Institutes of Health section on allergy and infectious diseases since before the start of the AIDS pandemic. So he's not just an infectious diseases doctor, but he, you know, he's a great face, and he really represents how we all think about things, and the way that our specialty approaches things. And so when we go through training, we're trained in a wide variety of areas, not the least of which is something called, it used to be called infection control, now it's called infection prevention. A lot of us, including me, are trained in epidemiology and understanding the spread of disease. So obviously, this being an infection and requiring a lot of thought about how to prevent its spread, we were all called upon to help figure out how to keep the infection from spreading within our communities, from spreading within our hospitals. That's certainly the first place that we start. That's where most of our infection prevention work takes place. How to treat this disease when people are hospitalized. That wasn't as much of an issue in pediatrics. I really didn't see anybody sick with COVID myself until the Delta surge last summer, which is great. It was very nice. We did a lot of sitting around, twiddling our thumbs at the children's hospital, especially during that first lockdown, because it turns out that if you don't go anywhere, you don't get sick. And so the hospitals were pretty quiet, but I would say that, and you know, we were very instrumental in helping kids get back into school. Le Bonheur, led mostly by me and some of my colleagues, we put together some guidelines for the schools, and we're just constantly answering questions. We helped give shots. We helped set up testing centers. So really anything that you can think of, I would say most doctors that you know were involved in it somehow, and to some degree, the infectious diseases doctors among us, we're a very small group, helped lead a lot of those efforts. With regard to the role of women in the pandemic, in terms of research and treatment, you know, in pediatrics, we are a female-dominated field, but we are still not in the majority of leadership positions. And infectious diseases on the adult side is still male-dominated, as internal medicine is more so than in pediatrics. But women leaders in infectious diseases have certainly become more prominent across the country. I would say in the last 20 years since I began my career. And we are all instrumental. I think women physicians in general, our role has been to make sure that women are not left out of research, that women are studied to the same degree that men are studied, so that we can understand how diseases affect men and women differently. COVID is a great example of how diseases can affect men and women differently. Think about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that caused the cerebral venous thrombosis syndrome that seemed to be much more dominant in women than in men, versus the mRNA vaccines that are causing occasional cases of myocarditis, which is dominant in males compared to females. Not anything that anybody could have predicted was going to happen. Pregnant women much more severely affected by COVID than women or men of the same age. And the mortality rate in men for COVID-19 is much higher than it is in women. Those of us who do pediatrics know that little boys are more affected by respiratory diseases than little girls. You know, in the neonatal ICU, we call them little wimpy white boys, because it's true. You know, preterm babies do much worse when they're male. We know that these gender and sex differences are really important. And I think that in general, science has recognized this, but I think it's the job of the women in the profession to continue to make sure that we are well represented in positions where we can make sure that women's health is appropriately addressed, not just in, you know, the US and Canada, but around the world.
Do you think that the pandemic will inspire more women into primary care or frontline fields of medicine, or do you think it might scare them off?
Well, again, so women make up more than half of medical students now. This is a recent phenomenon. We've come very, very close for many years, but in the US, we topped out at 50.5% very recently. So women actually do tend to be more in these frontline specialties. There are more, as we already discussed, more women in pediatrics, more women in family medicine. We really need a better distribution across all the specialties in order to be able to serve our population best. I'd love to say that lots of women are flocking to infectious diseases. Unfortunately, nobody really flocks to infectious diseases, even when exciting things like pandemics happen. Exciting, of course, you know that I don't think that this was a good thing. Because it's one of the lower paid specialties, but hopefully seeing all the amazing things that infectious disease specialists and researchers have been able to do so quickly with this pandemic will inspire more people to that specialty. I think that we do need more people in primary care specialties, but I think it definitely needs to be more men and women.
Thank you, Sandra. So from the
Thanks, Sandy.
hospital ward to the pharma ward, and Gili, Dr. Gili Hart, being a CEO of several biotech companies in Israel with extensive experience in global drug development, and in addition, you are also very much involved in the Shoham community by leading the Amit Scouts group, which is a popular and very active youth movement here in Shoham. Of all the amazing activities you are doing, can you let us know your biggest achievements so far? And as a follow-up question, can you please address what needs to be done in order to see more female executives in the business world?
Yeah. So again, thank you, everyone. I think it's a great opportunity to meet such an amazing and powerful women all around. It's not about the career, it's about us. I think obviously my greatest accomplishment, I would say, is my family, my kids and my husband that supports me all the way. And I wouldn't have done it without them and without him moving forward. But I think when thinking about kind of more professional accomplishments, I would say that building strong relationships within the companies that I manage with my employees, my female employees and my male employees actually is the best and the most, I would say, impressive accomplishment, because it actually escorts me along the way and people are continuing to work, to collaborate all together. It's not really about the money. It's not about, I think being public or so on. I think it's more about the people. And eventually I would say that I'm really happy and proud to manage a group that was able to bring forward and to get a drug approved for kids, for pediatric population. We're talking about kind of pediatric with a pediatrician here. So I was part of a team and I managed a team that was able to develop a drug for long-acting growth hormone for people and for kids who suffer from growth hormone deficiency, with a better outcome and less frequent injections. So that's really a technical accomplishment. But again, it's all about the people and about the power to move forward things, males and females all together. But I would like kind of to go and address your second question. And actually I've been thinking and questioning this question for the last 20 years. I've been doing drug development and being heavily involved in different companies or managing companies or being a board member in a biotech companies, because when I enter rooms, whether those are board meetings rooms or any other more business oriented rooms like conferences or things like that, unfortunately, I'm quite often, I understand and realize that I'm the only woman in this room, which is fun because you can use it for different things and you get attention more. you know, it makes things nice, and actually I think it's an advantage for me as Gili, but it really, and I have been asking myself why, because when you look in this area of life science, as mentioned before, you see many women. I mean, if you go back to medical school, I'm teaching courses in Israel, in Tel Aviv University Medical School. In Israel, 60 or even 70% of the students are indeed females these days. When you go to biology or biotechnology faculties, undergraduate or graduate schools, or even PhD, when you go to different universities, you can see really that the majority of those students are women. But when you get into the biotech companies, in my current company, we are like 30 employees. 75% of my employees are women. But in management teams all around, you see that the minority are women. And it's not because they are less successful, less talented, or less skilled. And I'm asking myself, why those women are not part of those management teams? Why, when I actually enter board, I'm the only woman there? And just recently, if you know, just there was a kind of announcement from one of the big banks in the US, JP Morgan, that they actually insisted that in order for them to invest and take forward companies into the public markets, they would like to have at least 1 or 2 female board members. That's part of the criteria to move forward. And I think for me, it's kind of a sad statement, because you need to force company to bring in those individuals, those female that can really contribute to the company. Why we're not there? And I must say, maybe I'm saying something that some of the women in this forum won't like. I think it's because it's our fault. It's not our fault because we are less skilled or less talented. It's all about making this decision and selecting the choices. And I've been seeing that all along the way when I've been working with an amazing, talented women. And when I wanted to promote those women to a VP level, to become C-suites and part of the management team, they need actually to suddenly switch their way of thinking. And sometimes they need to sacrifice, and I'm using the word sacrifice because some say that, they use this terminology, other parts of their lives that they are not really willing to do that. Because if you're a upper management and you are overseeing a big team, it's really hard for those individuals to kind of drop the pencil or the pen or the mouse and kind of shut down your laptop at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. and go and spend the afternoon with your kids and kind of stay away from your, on daily basis, from your commitments. And when you're talking about global companies with global interactions, prior to the Corona days, we had to take our trolley and, you know, in 2 hours or so, I was on a plane, headed to New York to meet with my Pfizer colleagues. There are things that you need to do, and some women are not willing to do those, and really to kind of sacrifice their other parts of their lives, mainly at certain stages, which are kids and family, and really in order to advance their career. They make a decision, which I respect, but it has implications. And when I see my career and how what I had to do in order to move forward and to advance myself, to become a CEO of a company or to take forward a company to become public, for many years, I spent half of my time here in Israel and half of my time abroad. And I missed many things. I mean, I had an FDA meeting and my daughter graduated from her elementary school, and I was not in the party of the most amazing ceremony that they had, and she will never forget that. And then I never knew my kids' teachers for many years because I was away. And a lot of things I missed. I earned other things, but I missed other things, and I'm happy and satisfied with my decisions, but not all of us are willing to do that, and I respect that. So I think it's really not about the opportunities, it's all about what we want for ourselves. That's how I see it.
If I can wrap up with that, one thing that actually ties in very well with something that Sandy said, and a quick follow-up question that I have for Judge Lipman that I think can tie this whole discussion together. Sandy was saying that, more than 50% finally of women graduate or women med students are, more than 50% of med students are now women. And that has been the case for a long time now in American law schools. And I hear what Gili is saying about women's participation in the upper levels of management in Israel. And it's very, very true. The same here in the United States. It's an ongoing discussion amongst how to diversify management levels of industry, law firms, hospitals, every place. I'm actually my area of law is employment discrimination. I've done it for 20 years. And this is something we actually have baked into our law. And I'm hoping that one good thing that has come out of this pandemic is that employers now have an opportunity to see different ways for different people to do their work that is more gender neutral and less physically tied to an office, so that people do have more flexibility to balance their home and family lives and reconfigure in their minds how men interact with their families and women interact with their families, and therefore also interact in their workplace. But that's just my own personal aside, because like you, Gili, when I was a young associate in a law firm, I was pulled aside and asked, why do all the women drop out at year 8? But that's neither here nor there. Judge Lipman, as a follow-up to this and thinking about how there are more women law students than there are male law students, and as you are the first female Jewish federal judge in Tennessee and the first Jewish district judge in Memphis, can you just finish us with what's your view on the need for diversity of all kinds on the judicial bench and in one of our top professions, the great profession of law? Slightly biased.
Thanks for the responsibility of tying all that together, but I'll take a shot at it. The remarks, I think what Gili said is correct in many ways, that a lot of the disparities, or some of the disparities, are due to personal choices, and I wouldn't characterize it as fault as much as I would personal choices. And we all obviously have the right to make those choices for ourselves. But when more women enter various positions, various industries, we certainly bring a different view. Not that we all think alike, because as we all know, all women do not think alike, just like all of any one group doesn't think alike. But we all bring those individual perspectives to the table. And Liz, in the long introduction, mentioned the Memphis Race Relations and Diversity Institute that I worked at for about a year and a half, just a brief time when I left law. The premise of that organization was that businesses profit more when they recognize diversity in their customers and their employees, in all ways in which they operate. And I think that the same is true in all of our industries, when we recognize that the need to have all sorts of viewpoints, all sorts of perspectives, from whether it's gender or race or experience. I know Liz was going to ask me about the nomination of Judge Jackson for the Supreme Court. And of course, I can't comment on any particular nomination like that, or any political issue, but the one thing that has been pointed out in the media about her, not just the diversity she brings in terms of race, but also that she was a former public defender, which is a unique position to be someone considered for the Supreme Court. So it's diversity of experiences, in addition to the ways in which we all look at diversity or think of diversity. It's different. The more different ideas that come to the table that are used in important decisions in our worlds, whether it's in law or in medicine or in research, or in business, the better outcomes I believe we will have. And that's the beauty that diversity brings to all of our tables.
Well, thank you, Sherry. And I think you bring a very important point of the importance of diversity to better our life. One question, which is the same for all of you, if you can give a tip for a young woman who's starting their own career nowadays, if there's one tip that you can share from your own experience, and this is the same questions for all of you.
If I may, I want to say one thing. I think one of the things that I learned along the way is really to count on your intuition, your gut feeling. Something that really eventually, if you feel it's the right thing for you, even if you get paid less, even if there is I would say something that you'll need eventually to kind of pay for doing that. But if it feels right for you, do it. Don't be afraid, just move forward and do it. Eventually, our life are so pretty opportunistic and things turn out to be well if you made the right decision at the time that you made those decisions. So it's all about intuition.
So lean on your gut feeling. Sherry, Dutch Lipman, and Sandra, and Ronit.
I was going to say, something very similar, which is that don't do what other people think that you should be doing. Pick something you love. I know it's amazing to think that any Jewish parent wouldn't want their child to be a doctor, but my father was like, oh, it's really hard to be a doctor. You don't want to be a doctor, be a pharmacist. I mean, he had all these other jobs in mind that he thought, and of course that only made me want to go to medical school more. So maybe that was his design. I don't think so, but perhaps, but do something, pick something that at least that you think that you're going to love. You're not going to do well at something unless you spend a lot of time at it, right? The 10,000 hours idea, to do anything really well, you're going to have to spend a lot of time at it. So it needs to be something that you love and that sparks your interest and that you're going to want to do well for a very long period of time.
Thank you. Ronit? You're muted. Ronit, you're muted.
Yeah, now it's okay. No, sorry. A tip. I think if I look at the way I did, I think mostly to have a challenge and to take challenges, even if it looks scary, you're afraid, take them. And this is the first tip, and another one is persistence. Like you have many challenges on the way, and you get a lot of no-nos, like from different institutions. Like you want to make a research with the Prisoner Rehabilitation Authority and with the Bureau of Statistics and all of it, and it's so hard to get their approval. You have to wait a long time, but don't give up, persist, and if I look back, I see it was worth it. So. And also with children, it's hard. This kind of my work, the research work, it's day and night, and really time consuming, and a lot of guilt with raising the children, that you're not a good enough mother. Yes, it's something that goes with you. But now when I look back, I think it was worth it, because I think my children had a role model, and I think they're quite proud. So I'm happy on the way I chose. Mm-hmm.
Sherry?
Well, I hate to go last on this because everyone stole the things I was going to say, but it's a lot of what Sandy said. The way I would say it is to follow your passion. Whenever what you care about, what drives you is what you're going to be successful at. And I'll say, I know my mother is on here. Both of my parents, as we were growing up, switched professions along the way, and that's another part of the lesson, that if what you're doing isn't what you feel passionate about, switch. Go in a different direction. I made some of those different calls along the way. in my career, and I was never unhappy, but I saw some things that I thought would make me happier and that I would feel more passionate about. And I think it's important to recognize that and to make those changes in life if that's the direction that your gut tells you to, if that's the direction that you feel passionate about.
Gili, one more tip for the group?
One more tip?
Yeah.
I think just going back to what I've just actually said when I kind of tried to describe my journey, you need to understand that you cannot have it all. That's, I think, the main message. You can't, as Ronit said, you can't be this amazing career, passionate woman and that your kids will be there and you'll be available for them 24/7. It doesn't work. You cannot have it all, and you need to decide and prioritize a certain time point, what is more important for you, and act accordingly, and understand that there are some prices and sacrifice you need to make, and it's fine as long as you are, again, your intuition and your decision making, and you're passionate about it, and that's what you want to do. So move forward with it, and everybody will be happy and actually proud of you, and you'll be, I think, proud of yourself and happy with what you've been accomplished.
Thank you. So here's the time, I think, for questions from the chat. Liz, you're on it.
All right, let's see. Has anyone been brave enough to do our chat questions? If I can find the chat, where'd my chat box go?
Liz,
Okay.
I can help you. So I see one question that looks great. I'm Laura Linder, by the way.
Thank
Hi,
you, Laura.
everybody.
Laura is like the best substitute person to do this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Liz. We
She's
just have
even
a few
wearing
minutes.
glasses.
And I think Bluma's question that she put in the chat is really fabulous.
I lost my chat box.
All right, do you see it, or you want me to go ahead
No,
and read the
please
question?
go, Laura,
Okay.
I tell you.
So the question that Bluma posted, I think, really is relevant and important. It was touched on during the conversation, which is, do you think that if family life was valued more, there would be more understanding, even celebration of women and men taking off for important family milestones? It seems like in Europe, there is more sensitivity to the value of family life.
I think so. I mean, I think that this was actually something that I was thinking about while Gili was speaking, which is that what she was describing to some degree is what is expected of somebody in a certain level of position based on the standards that have been set by men for a very, very long time. And so with more, potentially, if there are more women in higher positions, will expectations shift? I mean, obviously, we all know we're all going to have to work hard. But the question is now, with what Liz said about, work looking different than it did before, is there going to be more flexibility, at least in certain jobs? It may not be at the very highest levels, and because I can't really speak to what happens in the boardroom of a large biotech company at all. I mean, I cannot speak to that, but I think that there are ways to change the way various job requirements are viewed, and that it might become more acceptable the more women who are in positions of power to allow a greater degree of flexibility and allow women to advance more. Now, does that mean that there's a group of women who need to make that happen? Do those women need to sacrifice all the things that they want to do in order to get into those positions of power? I don't know, but I think some of it is that we see things very much through the lens that currently exists, which is, I think, a very male-oriented lens. But I think also some of it is that we know what society expects of us. So even though women are, quote unquote, making the choices, like Gili said, which are, we all make our own choices about ourselves, and that's fine. Are we making those choices sometimes because that's also what we think is expected of us? And we'd make different choices if society accepted women making those sorts of decisions, making the decision to not necessarily be there for every event. I certainly miss things along the way. I don't think my children think I was any less of a mother because I didn't attend every event at school. They have two parents. There was always a parent there. Doesn't need to be me each time. And I tried very hard not to feel guilty about it. Didn't go so well, but I think that all needs to change for sure.
All right, we do have, well, I have two more questions, but I also have a message that we need to be wrapping up. These are really fantastic. This has been a wonderful, wonderful discussion, but I think it is just about time for us to talk about our next program, which is Museums as a Catalyst for Change. That will be on Tuesday, April 5th at noon Central Daylight Time, because we do get to set our clocks forward this upcoming weekend, and 8 p.m. again, Israeli time. That will focus on the National Civil Rights Museum here in Memphis and Tel Aviv's Yitzhak Rabin Center in Tel Aviv, and same place, same time, just on April 5th. I'm going to hand this, thank you so much to our esteemed panelists. You all have been fascinating. I do want to continue this discussion about parenting and women and changing the dynamic and changing the paradigm, because that is genuinely something I find extraordinarily fascinating and have so many personal opinions on. Gili, you and I could talk about this forever, and I'm not kidding.
Happy to do that.
Because I think we're totally simpatico about it. My husband's on the call. He's like, don't engage her. Do not engage. Do not engage. But thank you all for being here, our panelists. Thanks for taking time out of your day. I'm going to hand this over to Amir Sela of the Jewish Agency in Israel to talk about the agency's efforts with the war in Ukraine right now. Amir.
Hi, Liz. Thank you. Now I know who Elton is. I said, okay, this is me and another guy. So now I know who is Elton. This was lovely. I really enjoyed that. It was fascinating, and I feel I learned a lot, and there's a lot I can share with my wife as well. So just a quick update about what's going on in Ukraine from our side, from Jewish agency side. Before the crisis, we had 20-something shlichim, emissaries in the Ukraine, all of them been evacuated to the surrounding countries around Ukraine, and they're helping Jewish people moving out of the country and helping them, if they wish, making aliyah to Israel. There is obviously a very sharp surge in the request for aliyah from the Ukraine, but also from Russia. So not only from the Ukraine, also from Russia and from Belarus. The situation on the ground is very complicated, and people are panicked. So that's about that. We are expecting to absorb more than 20,000 Jewish Ukrainian in the next few months, and about the same number. There is even a chance of higher number of Ukrainian refugees which are not Jewish in Israel in the next few months as well. We are collecting, the Jewish agency is collecting with local authorities in Israel humanitarian aid, which now it's almost, I think about 15 tons of humanitarian aid. It's a winter equipment and personal hygiene equipment. That's about it. We're working very hard to give money to our local employees in the Ukraine. It's very difficult right now to give them their salaries and everything. Everything is very just complicated. We bought about 30 satellite phones that we hand out in the Ukraine to people that we cannot, we will not be able to be in touch with them. And that's about it. We working really hard, and this crisis is echoing all over, not only in Europe, all over here in the Middle East as well. So that's about it. That's my quick update. I want to call now to Carrie Ranowski, which is the chair of the Memphis Partnership and Jewish Federation board member. Carrie.
Thank you, Amir, and thank you to all our guests today. It was just an incredible presentation by all of you, so we appreciate your joining us. And as Amir just noted, you know, there is a lot going on now in Ukraine with Jewish agencies helping out at this moment. And right now, the Jewish Federations of North America have a $20 million emergency campaign so they can raise funds for Ukraine, and the agencies who are actually on the ground there trying to do as much as they can. Memphis, our own Memphis community, has already contributed or raised $314,000. It is still not too late to give. 100% of all funds collected will go toward the efforts from doing things such as helping the thousands of people from Ukraine and Russia make Aliyah to Israel, to, you know, of course, securing temporary housing, helping with food and water, many things. So as you can see on the screen here, there's a QR code. And though I'm not technical, it had to be explained to me. If you hold your phone camera up there, that it should be able to take you to a web page where you can make a donation. And there's also going to be a link posted, should be now in the chat box, and you can click on the link and that will take you to a web page where you can make a donation. And you know, every little bit helps, and we do want to thank all of you who have already given, and if you are able to, any help you can give is very appreciated. Also, I wanted to mention that this coming Monday, March 14 at 5:30 on Zoom, there's going to be a community-wide briefing on the Ukraine, and you should all be receiving emails in the next day or so with details about that program. And last but not least, I just wanted to thank the planning committee for today's webinar. Obviously, a special thanks to Liz and Lee Moore, who did a wonderful job moderating. You are all terrific. They poured a lot of time into getting questions ready, and they just did a wonderful job. And then also thank you to all the backup committee support: Marcy Hirsch, Michelle Buring, Sigal Borin, Amir, Sela, and Arela Koter. So thank you very much. And a thank you to Anna, even though she may not be on now, Anna Berkman, who preceded Amir. It was actually her idea to do the International Jewish Women's Day event. So we are very indebted to Anna for that. And again, thank you all. And we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar on April 5th. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Today.
Shalom.
So much. Wonderful.
Good to see everyone.
Good to see you, Rabbi. How are you? Nice to
I'm
see
coming
you.
to Memphis.
Are
I'm
you
coming to
coming?
Memphis in the
You're
end
coming?